What if every problem you've ever faced, every moment of fear, every shortage, every pain, wasn't actually happening to the real you at all? Stay with me here, because what I'm about to share might completely reshape how you see yourself and your entire reality. There's a secret hidden in plain sight, spoken by Jesus himself in just 2 words. Not a prayer, not a commandment, not even a teaching in the traditional sense. Just 2 words that, when truly understood and allowed to breathe through, you can dissolve limitation without you having to fight, struggle, or force anything into existence. Those 2 words, I am. Now, I know what you might be thinking. I've heard this before. This is basic Bible knowledge. But here's the thing. Most people rush past this statement thinking it's just Jesus identifying himself, giving his name, or making a claim about his unique divinity. They miss the revolutionary truth entirely, because when Jesus declared I am, he wasn't talking about a body, walking around in sandals 2,000 years ago. He wasn't identifying with a personality, a history, or even the circumstances of his human experience. He was revealing something so profound that it has the power to transform water into wine, to heal the sick, to raise what appears dead back to life, and he was doing it through consciousness alone. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. Here's what changes everything. You've been taught your entire life to seek God somewhere outside yourself, to pray to something distant up there, separate from you, to beg, to plead, to hope that maybe, if you're good enough or faithful enough, divine power might reach down and touch your life. But I am shatters this entire paradigm completely, because God isn't something you reach for at all. God is the very I that you are right now, reading these words, aware of this moment. Not will be someday, not could become if you meditate enough. Is right now. The presence breathing through you in this very instant. Has this ever happened to you? You wake up and immediately start identifying with your problems? I am broke. I am sick. I am alone. I am afraid. Every single time you attach those 2 powerful words, I am, to a limitation, you're doing something most people don't realize. You're claiming that the infinite presence of God within you is somehow limited by temporary circumstances. You're giving divine creative power to illusion. And this is where everything shifts, because when you truly let I am breathe through you, when you stop identifying with conditions and start recognizing what you really are beneath every circumstance, something miraculous begins to unfold, not through effort, not through willpower, but through a recognition so simple that most people miss it their entire lives. What you're about to discover might surprise you, because this isn't another spiritual technique to add to your collection. This is about remembering an identity you've never actually lost, and what happens when you finally allow that truth to breathe through every moment of your existence. Think about the words that come out of your mouth on a daily basis, not just what you say to others, but especially what you say to yourself in those quiet moments when no one else is listening. I am so tired. I am not good enough. I'm struggling financially. I am always getting sick. These seem like harmless observations about your current reality, don't they? Just honest assessments of where you are right now. But here's the hidden truth that most people never discover. Every single time you attach I am to a limitation, you're doing something far more powerful than simply describing your circumstances. You're actually claiming that the infinite presence within you, the divine consciousness that creates worlds, is somehow confined by temporary conditions. You're taking the most creative force in existence and binding it to illusion. This is the real root of suffering, not the circumstances themselves, but what you declare "I am" is in relation to those circumstances. Because those two words carry creative power that most people use unconsciously, binding themselves to the very experiences they desperately want to escape. It's like having the master key to every door in the universe, but using it to lock yourself in a closet. Now, I want to go even deeper into this revelation, because when you look at how Jesus used these same two words, everything becomes crystal clear. Pay attention to this. Jesus never once said, "I am sick." He never declared, "I am lacking," or "I am limited by these circumstances," not even when he was facing the cross, not when he was surrounded by doubt, not when the physical world seemed to contradict everything he was teaching. If this kind of deep spiritual truth speaks to you, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. This is where we explore consciousness at levels most teachings never touch, and I want you here for the journey ahead. Instead, what did he say? "I am the resurrection and the life. I am the light of the world. I am the way, the truth, and the life." Do you see the pattern? He was identifying exclusively with the eternal, the unchanging, the infinite. He was letting the divine nature breathe through every declaration of identity, refusing to claim temporary conditions as his true self. And this wasn't just beautiful poetry or spiritual philosophy to inspire people. This was spiritual law in its purest form, because when you consistently use "I am" only with what is eternal and true, your entire experience begins to mirror that consciousness. Your reality literally reorganizes itself around the identity you claim. This isn't about positive thinking or trying to convince yourself of something that isn't real. This is about recognizing what has always been real beneath the surface of every temporary condition. Your circumstances are like clouds passing across the sky, temporary, changing, ultimately powerless to alter the vastness behind them. But when you identify with the clouds instead of the sky itself, you forget your true nature. You start believing that the passing weather is who you are. And that's when limitation becomes your experience, not because it's true, but because you've claimed it as your identity. The transformation happens when you make a different choice, a different decision about what "I am" actually refers to. When you let those words breathe through, you connected only to truth, to the eternal, to the infinite presence that you are beneath every circumstance and condition. If this is starting to click for you and you're seeing how you've been unconsciously using these words to claim limitation, write in the comments, "I am ready for truth." Here's where this journey takes a turn that might surprise you, because what I'm about to share goes against almost everything you've been taught in traditional spiritual circles. You've probably been told that spiritual growth is about developing yourself, becoming more enlightened, achieving higher consciousness through years of practice and discipline. That if you meditate long enough, pray hard enough, do enough inner work, eventually you'll reach some elevated state where you finally connect with the divine. But that entire paradigm is built on a fundamental misunderstanding. Because "I am" isn't something you create, develop, or achieve. It already is, right now, in this exact moment. You don't become the "I am" through any spiritual exercise, accomplishment, or technique. You simply stop identifying with what you are not. This is the hidden truth behind every problem you've ever experienced. Not that something is wrong with you, not that you need to fix yourself or improve yourself or transform yourself into something better, but that you've forgotten what you already are. You've been looking in the mirror and seeing only the costume, forgetting the infinite presence wearing it. Every limitation, every struggle, every moment of suffering exists because of this one case of mistaken identity. You've convinced yourself that the "I" you are is this body, this personality, this history, these circumstances, and from that false starting point everything becomes a problem that needs solving. But the I you truly are isn't waiting to become something. It's not on a journey from broken to whole. It is, was, and always will be the complete expression of infinite consciousness. Now let me show you how this plays out in the most practical way possible. Because this isn't just abstract philosophy. This directly impacts your everyday experience. When you're facing illness, the automatic response is to say, "I am sick and I need healing." It seems logical, honest, just stating the facts. Your body hurts, the diagnosis is real, the symptoms are undeniable. But watch what happens in that moment. The instant you claim, "I am sick," you've taken the infinite consciousness that you are and identified it with a temporary condition. You've declared that the eternal I is somehow diseased, broken, in need of repair. You've denied the fundamental truth of your being, because the I that you are, the real you behind every thought, sensation, and circumstance, cannot be sick. That I is infinite spirit, pure consciousness, the presence of God expressing as your individuality. The body may show symptoms, absolutely. Physical sensations are real on their level, but those symptoms are not happening to the real I. They're happening in the experience, not to the experiencer. This distinction changes everything. When you rest in this knowing, when you let I am breathe through you without claiming the condition as your identity, something remarkable happens. Healing unfolds naturally, not because you fought the illness or begged for intervention, but because you stopped empowering limitation with divine creative force. You withdrew your identification from the temporary and returned it to the eternal. This same principle applies to every area where you feel stuck, limited, or broken. The shift isn't in changing your circumstances. The shift is in remembering what you are beneath every circumstance and letting that truth breathe through your awareness without the constant overlay of false claims. If you're beginning to see how you've been identifying with conditions instead of consciousness itself, drop a comment and simply write, "I see it now." This understanding doesn't stop at health. It flows into every single corner of your life, where you feel lack, where you feel something is missing, where you're struggling to make things work. Because the same spiritual law is operating everywhere, and once you see it in one area, you can't unsee it anywhere else. When you look at your bank account and feel that familiar tightness in your chest, what's the automatic thought? I am broke. I am struggling financially, I don't have enough, and immediately you're in that space of trying to figure out how to get more, how to attract abundance, how to manifest supply from somewhere outside yourself. You're operating from the assumption that you're separate from what you need, that abundance is something you have to pursue, capture, and hold on to before it slips away. But what if the entire framework is backwards? Not, I am poor and need supply, but I am the infinite abundance of God made visible, not as something you're trying to become, but as what you already are beneath the temporary appearance of lack. The substance of infinite supply isn't somewhere else waiting for you to access it. It's the very consciousness breathing through you right now. The same goes for relationships and connection. How many times have you felt, I am alone, I am unloved, I need someone to complete me? That declaration sets up the entire experience of searching, yearning, feeling incomplete until someone outside yourself fills the void. But when you recognize, I am the presence of love itself, everything shifts. You're not seeking love from a place of emptiness. You're expressing the love you are from a place of wholeness. And here's what's crucial to understand. This isn't denial of your current circumstances. This isn't pretending you have money in the bank when you don't, or ignoring real loneliness. This is recognition of what lies beneath all circumstances. The eternal I that is your true identity, completely unchanged by any condition appearing in the world of form. Now, this is where most spiritual teachings take a different path entirely. And it's important to see why this approach is fundamentally different. Most of what you've encountered gives you something to do. Visualize your desires. Affirm positive statements. Follow a manifestation ritual. Repeat mantras. Do the inner work. Take aligned action. There's always another technique, another practice, another thing you need to accomplish to finally get what you want. But Jesus revealed something far more powerful than any technique: a state of being. I am is not an action you perform, it's a recognition of what already is. When you truly understand this, something extraordinary happens in your consciousness. You stop trying to get things from God, as if God is some external source you need to convince or manipulate into giving you what you need. Instead, you start realizing that God is already the substance of your being, expressing as your experience right now. You're not trying to heal the body. You're recognizing the I was never sick. You're not trying to create abundance. You're recognizing I am is already infinite supply. The shift happens in awareness, not in effort. This is the revelation that transforms everything, because it takes you out of the endless cycle of doing, striving, working to become something you're not, and drops you into the simple recognition of what you've always been. If this is landing differently for you than other teachings you've encountered, leave a comment saying, "This changes everything." Let me share with you what this looks like when it actually happens in someone's life, because these aren't just theoretical concepts. This is about real transformation in the physical world. There was a woman named Margaret who lived with chronic pain for 7 years. Doctors ran every test imaginable and found nothing. No explanation, no diagnosis, no treatment that worked. She tried everything: medications, therapies, alternative treatments, and nothing touched it. The pain was constant, debilitating, defining her entire existence. When she finally encountered someone who understood this principle of true identity, she wasn't given another treatment plan. She wasn't told to visualize healing or affirm her way out of pain. Instead, she was asked one simple question: who is the I that says I am in pain? If something shifted inside you while watching this, do me a favor and hit that like button. It tells me this message is landing where it needs to, and it helps others who are searching for this truth find their way here. That question stopped her completely. For 20 minutes she sat in silence, wrestling with something she'd never considered before. She'd been so certain that she was the one in pain, that the pain was happening to her, to the real her. But as she sat with that question, something began to crack open in her awareness. She started to see that she'd been identifying her true self, the infinite I am that she was, with a body's sensations. The pain didn't belong to the I she actually was. It belonged to a false sense of identity. Within 3 weeks, the pain that had dominated her life for 7 years began to diminish. Within 2 months, it was completely gone. Not because she fought it, not because she found the right treatment, but because she withdrew her identification from it. She stopped claiming it as belonging to her true self. Then there's Robert, a businessman who was watching everything he'd built crumble around him. Bankruptcy was looming, debt was crushing him, and every morning he'd wake up with that same desperate thought: I am failing. I am losing everything. His prayers were frantic attempts to get God to save his business, to send customers, to provide some miracle from outside himself. But then he encountered this understanding of I am consciousness, and everything about his approach changed. He stopped claiming failure as his identity. Instead, every morning before looking at the numbers or checking emails, he'd sit quietly and recognize something different. I am is the abundance of God. I am is infinite resource. I am is divine intelligence expressing. This wasn't positive thinking trying to convince himself of something that wasn't true. This was withdrawing his identification from lack and returning it to the infinite supply that was already the substance of his being. It took 4 months, not overnight. but steadily, and something remarkable began to happen. Ideas came that he'd never considered. Connections appeared out of nowhere. Opportunities opened that had been completely invisible before. His business didn't just survive the crisis, it transformed into something more aligned with his actual purpose, something that felt like natural expression rather than desperate struggle. And the crucial point is this: the change happened first in his consciousness, in what he claimed "I am" was, and only then did the circumstances follow. These aren't isolated miracles or special cases. This is how consciousness works, when you align it with truth instead of claiming limitation as your identity. If you're starting to see how your own declarations of "I am" have been shaping your experience, write in the comments, "I'm ready to shift." There's another story that shows just how far this principle reaches, and it might be the most challenging one to grasp because it involves someone else's struggle, not your own. A mother came for help because her son was deep in addiction. She'd spent years on her knees praying, begging God to change him, to break the chains of drugs that were destroying his life. She'd tried intervention, therapy, tough love, enabling, every strategy imaginable. Nothing worked. Her son kept using, kept disappearing, kept breaking her heart into smaller and smaller pieces. When she asked for guidance, she was told something that initially shocked her, something that seemed to go against every motherly instinct. Stop praying for your son to change. Stop seeing him as an addict. Stop identifying him with his condition. Instead, she was given a completely different approach. Recognize the truth of who he really is. Your son's real identity is "I am," the presence of God expressing as his individuality. That presence cannot be addicted. That presence is whole, free, and perfect right now. For 6 months she practiced this, not once, not when it was convenient, but daily. And some days it felt impossible because the evidence in front of her screamed the opposite. Some days he seemed worse, not better. But she held to the truth of his being, not the appearance of his behavior. She stopped mothering the addiction and started recognizing the Christ consciousness within him, even when he couldn't see it himself. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, something shifted. He entered treatment on his own decision. He stayed, and years later, he's living free. Not because she changed him through her prayers, or manipulated circumstances, or forced him into recovery, but because she stopped empowering the false identity. She stopped giving divine creative power to the illusion of who he appeared to be, and instead let truth breathe through her vision of him. Now, here's what's important to understand about all these stories and this entire principle. Knowing this intellectually doesn't transform your life. You can understand the concept perfectly, nod your head in agreement, feel inspired for a moment, and then return to the same patterns of claiming limitation tomorrow morning. The shift happens. Through practice, through repetition, through making this recognition so consistent that it becomes your natural state of being. And the beautiful thing is, you don't have to start with the biggest challenges. You start with the smallest, most ordinary moments of your day. When you wake up in the morning, before your mind fills with the day's problems and tasks, pause and recognize, "I am awake." Not a tired person facing another difficult day, not someone burdened with responsibilities, but infinite consciousness expressing as this experience of waking. When you eat, recognize, "I am sustained by infinite substance." When you're working, recognize, "I am" is the intelligence accomplishing this task. These aren't affirmations trying to make something true that isn't true yet. This is recognition of what already is true beneath every activity, every moment, every breath. The difference between affirmation and recognition is everything. Affirmations come from a place of lack, trying to create what you believe you don't have. Recognition comes from wholeness, acknowledging what has always been present but forgotten. If you're beginning to see how you could weave this into your daily moments, drop a comment saying, "I'm practicing recognition." There's a specific practice that can interrupt the entire pattern of reactive living, and it's simpler than you might think. When fear suddenly grips you, when pain overwhelms your senses, when circumstances seem completely impossible, and your mind starts racing through worst-case scenarios, that's the exact moment to do something radically different. Pause everything. Not just pause physically, but pause the entire momentum of reaction that wants to take over. Don't react to what you're seeing. Don't immediately try to solve the problem. Don't panic or strategize or scramble for solutions. Just pause. And in that pause, ask yourself one question. What is the truth of my being right now? Not what appears to be true, not what the circumstances are screaming at you, but what is eternally true beneath every condition. The answer is always the same, regardless of what's happening in the external world. I am is the presence of God, untouched by any condition. I am is whole. I am is supplied. I am is safe. I am is loved. Not because your circumstances prove it in that moment, not because you feel it emotionally, but because this is the eternal nature of being expressing as you, constant and unchanging regardless of what's appearing in the world of form. This pause is where transformation happens. It's the space between stimulus and conditioned response, the gap where you can choose consciousness over unconscious reaction. And the more you practice this pause, the more natural it becomes until it's your automatic response to crisis rather than panic. Now, let me address something that creates enormous anxiety for most people, and it's directly connected to why letting I am breathe through you feels so threatening at first. You've been taught your entire life that supply, money, resources, opportunities comes from sources outside yourself. Your job is your source. Your clients are your source. Your investments, your business, your spouse's income, these are the sources you depend on. This creates constant underlying fear. What if you lose the job? What if the clients leave? What if the market crashes? What if the source dries up? You're always one disaster away from losing everything because your security is tied to external conditions that you can't fully control. But when you understand that I am is infinite supply, everything about this framework collapses because you realize the source was never outside you in the first place. Your employer isn't your source. Your clients aren't your source. That investment portfolio isn't your source. I am is your source, and that source is infinite, never-ending, always flowing through whatever channels are appropriate for this moment. The channels may change. One job might end and another begin. One stream of income might dry up while three others open in unexpected ways, but the source itself never diminishes, never fails, never runs out, because the source is the infinite consciousness that you are, expressing as your experience of supply. This doesn't mean you quit your job and sit around waiting for money to fall from the sky. It means you work from a completely different foundation. You're not working to create your source. You're working as the expression of infinite supply flowing into visible form. The anxiety dissolves because you're no longer dependent on any single channel remaining open. If this is reshaping how you see your relationship to supply and abundance, write in the comments, "My source is within." Now let's be completely honest about something, because I don't want to paint an unrealistic picture that sets you up for disappointment. Knowing this truth and living it consistently are two very different things. You're going to have moments, maybe many moments, where you completely forget everything we've talked about here. Fear will overwhelm the truth. Circumstances will seem so real, so pressing, so urgent that I am consciousness feels like fantasy, like spiritual bypassing, like denying reality. This is completely normal. This is part of the journey. You're unlearning not just years, but lifetimes of conditioning that taught you to identify with limitation, with the body, with circumstances, with the false self. That programming runs deep, and it doesn't disappear just because you intellectually understand a higher truth. Here's what's important to grasp. Spiritual realization works in consciousness first, not in conditions. Sometimes the inner shift brings immediate change in your external experience. You recognize truth, and within days or even hours, the situation transforms. But sometimes, and this is where people give up too soon, the inner work takes weeks or months of consistent practice before you see any evidence in the physical world. Your job in this process isn't to make things happen. That's the old paradigm trying to sneak back in. Your job is simply to know the truth and remain faithful to it, regardless of what appearances are showing you. When nothing seems to be changing, when the condition persists, when doubt creeps in, whispering that this doesn't work, that's when you return to recognition. I am is whole. I am is supplied. I am is the presence of God expressing. Give yourself grace in this process. Don't beat yourself up every time you forget and slip back into claiming limitation. Just notice it and gently return to truth. The practice is in the returning, not in achieving perfection. What begins to happen over time, with consistent practice and patience, is that this recognition becomes less of something you do and more of who you are. Living as I am stops being a technique you apply during meditation or crisis and becomes your constant state of being. You wake as I am. You walk through your day as I am. You work as I am. You love as I am. You rest as I am. You're no longer a person trying to be spiritual, trying to reach some elevated state, trying to connect with God. Your spirit appearing as person, expressing through this unique form. It's like a wave that still looks like a wave, still moves like a wave, still has its individual shape and characteristics, but it never forgets that it's the ocean. You're the wave that knows itself as the infinite sea, and that knowing changes everything about how you move through life. When you truly let I am breathe through you at this level, transformation stops being something you pursue and becomes something that flows naturally. Healing happens without effort. Supply appears without strain. Relationships align without manipulation. Your purpose unfolds without forcing. Not because you've gained some new power or achieved some special status, but because you've remembered what you've always been beneath every false identity you've worn. If you're committed to this path of remembering despite the challenges, comment below, I am remembering. If you've made it this far, I want you to know that says something significant about where you are on your journey. Most people never question the identity they've been claiming. Most people never pause long enough to ask who the I really is beneath all the conditions and circumstances. But you're here, you're listening, you're allowing this truth to breathe through your awareness. This channel exists to keep unpacking these deeper revelations, to explore the consciousness that most spiritual teachings only scratch the surface of. So if this resonated with you, if something shifted inside while you were watching, go ahead and subscribe. Not just to add another number, but because this work deserves your continued attention, and there's so much more to discover together. And I'd love to hear from you. If you stayed with me all the way through, drop a comment right now and simply say, I am awake. Let me know you're here, that you're recognizing this truth, that you're part of this community, remembering who we really are. If this video moved something in you, hit that like button. It helps this message reach others who are ready for it, who are searching for this exact understanding without even knowing what they're looking for yet. And listen, there's a video right here that takes this even deeper into how I am consciousness transforms your daily experience in ways you might not expect. Click and continue with me over there. Let's keep this revelation unfolding together.